We have a really action-packed conversation and discussion today with these awesome panelists on our second ever webinar covering Angel Group Management. I'll start with a brief introduction to our panelists today. Ms. Michaela is a partner at Groove Capital. Groove Capital is the most active angel group network in the entire state of Minnesota. So that's a huge accomplishment. And thank you so much for being here with us today, Ms. Michaela. Christopher is the executive chair of Launchpad Venture Group. And he is also chair emeritus of the ACA, the Angel Capital Association, arguably the world's largest angel group and network. And then Mr. Alden is a serial entrepreneur and managing director of Sidecar Angels and an ACA board member as well. Panelists, I think the best way for us to kick off this conversation and dig in is really to just start with a question about your journey. Just if you could tell us a little bit about your journey to being on this call with us today and how you got involved in angel investing.
Michaela should go first.
Sure.
Ladies first. Okay. We won't be following that suit for all the questions, but I'll take this one. So my introduction to early stage investing and angel investing came really early. So I went to school at the University of North Dakota. And at the time of studying there, they had the first in the nation student-run venture group, which syndicated deals with a lot of the kind of upper Midwest angel networks. And the folks running those angel networks at the time were very kind to letting a bunch of students come to their meetings and to really just open up the doors as far as like, what does it look like to be an angel investor? And so that was my first kind of introduction to it, which I think kind of helped plant the seed of like what it is, and just expose myself to that early, or that asset class in general. My career then took me into a path of just investments in general. So I raised mostly money from foreign investors to invest in US companies, have my broker-dealer licenses, more formal training. But then, as with a lot of people, kind of got to that point during COVID of like my careers pulled me a little bit away from my values. And so getting back to Groove was a way to focus on startups, which was always an area of passion for mine, use my investment kind of background from my career, but then also start to deploy money and see kind of an impact on the things that you're funding, which is really cool. So I would contribute it to that really early exposure, well before I was ready to write my own personal checks.
As Taylor said, I'm a serial entrepreneur as well. So I was very aware of the angel investment community long before I began angel investing myself. And I got into angel investing about a dozen years ago. Just started to, I guess I would use the word dabble. That's probably the wrong word, but it's probably the reality, in a few angel investments early on. And since then have gotten much more involved. And now am co-managing an angel group here in Boston, which is where I'm based, and moving forward with it. And then earlier this year, I joined the Angel Capital Association board because I really feel that there's interest from my end in getting more involved in the ecosystem and the community, but also wanted to really see the growth or the continued growth of angel capital investing in at least in the United States, but ideally globally.
Taylor, I did a lot of work with startups early in my career. I was a corporate lawyer in a firm that was very, very much a part of the dot-com boom, and represented a lot of startups and a lot of venture capital fund formations and acquisitions, and saw the whole life cycle. And one of my clients went public. I worked on the IPO, and then I ended up going in-house, and I was part of the technology industry for many years. Ultimately, the general counsel, and then later the CFO of the company. And we sold that company in a late stage, M&A kind of an exit. And the company had gotten large, and I kind of missed that excitement of sort of what's next, what's new, that you see when you're in the innovation economy. entrepreneurs are total optimists, and angels generally are people who've accumulated a certain amount of knowledge, and they've been lucky and successful, and they're people who, they don't want to just go play golf or drive a boat in circles. They want to give back a little bit and stay involved. And so I missed that energy, and that was really appealing to me. So I looked around. I got involved in the scene in Boston, and I sort of became more educated about entrepreneurship and realized, in terms of, all net new jobs are created by startups in the U.S. And the more I sort of learned about the area, the more important I thought it was to do it well. And I looked around Boston's market, and it was a busy market 15, 20 years ago. But I thought there was room to do it even more professionally. And I got together with the guy who founded Launchpad, and we set out to really build a super professional approach to putting capital to work, backing interesting and diverse founders, creating jobs, um, and really bringing a level of sophistication and professionalism to what had been a fairly informal and disorganized type of capital. And ultimately, that's what led to Seraph, right? I mean, one of the things that's missing in this market is a tool to figure out how you're doing. The old joke, Taylor, is, hey, am I a good angel investor? And the answer is like, I don't know. I'll tell you in 10 years, right? And having a tool to figure out, like, keep track of what you're doing, and how your performance is, was really important to us. And that's what led to the whole Seraph story.
Thank you so much for that. And it's a perfect segue as well into the last kind of introduction here, which is to Seraph. And fun fact, Mr. Christopher was the founder of Seraph. At Seraph, we get the opportunity and the privilege to work with some of the best angel investors and angel groups in the entire world by providing them and empowering their back office operations with deal flow and portfolio management software. We also, too, for anybody that is new to Seraph, we have about 12,000 weekly readers to our Seraph Compass. There we write award-winning educational content for early stage investing. And so if you ever need to sharpen up your skills, or you just want to learn more from these folks, Chris has written a ton of articles for us there, as well as some ebooks and things like that are all accessible and available to you at our Seraph Compass. For the remainder of this webinar, I have about 10 questions that we solicited from a lot of our Seraph Compass readers and blog subscribers, as well as our Twitter and our social media kind of pages. You can chat in using the Q&A at any point, and I'll kind of keep up with those questions as well. So our attendees today get an opportunity to kind of ask our awesome panelists some questions. Working for Seraph, a lot of folks come to us and, ask us questions because they want to start and manage an angel group themselves. What key factors should be considered when forming an angel group?
Well, Alden and I would be remiss if we didn't plug the fact that ACA has a Angel Group in a Box kit to help you understand what the issues are. And one of the things that I'm sorry to jump right in here, I'll just finish the thought and then I'll hand it over to you guys. But one of the things to keep in mind, Taylor, and I think you've seen this because I know Seraph has clients in Europe and in Africa and in US. There is no one right answer for how to run an angel group or how to structure it. It really depends a lot on the market.
Mm.
Angel groups in tier one entrepreneurial cities that are very, very large and have really active ecosystems, and a lot of big research universities and a lot of alumni from tech companies have options and things they can do that it's harder to do in regions with emerging tech scenes and smaller populations and so forth. So I think it's important to think a little bit about your market before you jump into a structure. And the other thing I think I would say is that it's always evolving and people are doing different kinds of things. But as a general matter, if you're going to be structured as a fund, you're going to want to take an approach like Alden does to really encourage people to be active rather than passive. In some funds, you can have people who they're just cocktail party angels, where they just want to talk about being an angel and say they have investments in startups, but they don't want to do the work. And I think that it's easy to do that in a membership-based model where each person is a two-legged portfolio and they're building their own in their portfolio, and so they have no choice but to be active. But in a fund, if it's not properly managed, you can get more of a passive kind of an investor, and that can be a downside with that structure. So I'll park it there and let the experts talk a little bit more about that point.
Michaela, your comments, and then I'm happy to follow.
Sure. I was just going to piggyback on something that Christopher mentioned. You can also get some free riders in traditional angel networks too. So it's not exclusive to funds. So let me, I guess, just give a little bit of background on how we're structured, so you can kind of get an understanding of our my experience and how it informs kind of my thoughts on some of this. So Groove Capital is both an early stage fund and an angel network. The way we're set up is anything that the fund invests in. So the fund is really the engine to do the due diligence and the screening, set deal terms if we're leading something. And then anything that we invest in, we share that with our angel network, including LPs. LPs can do sidecar investments, or angels can invest using the same term sheets directly onto the cap table. Every once in a while, we're also doing SPDs to facilitate the angel group. But it is really important to build community. In our situation, even though we have two different pathways to participate, we're really mindful not to create any sort of hierarchy between our angel group or our LPs. We really want to make sure that individuals are participating in whatever way makes most sense to them. And then we're also giving folks the opportunity to plug into our due diligence, portfolio support, all of that, regardless if they're an LP or an angel network. Part of our investment thesis is investing at high volume. And so we have to tap into the skills and to the knowledge base of our members. But that participation piece has been really critical to the community that we're building. And we constantly get feedback that our community is energetic. It's only energetic because people show up. And so cracking that nut and really getting people to continue to lean in is really critical.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Michaela. So I'll build off of what both Michaela and Christopher said. So our group structure, just give a quick idea, is we are set up in effect as a fund, but our members, that's what we call them, our members of our group, are the ones who contribute to that fund. And most importantly, and this speaks a little bit to what Christopher is alluding to, is our members vote on how that fund gets invested. So we do not have passive members because they are actively deciding what companies that money gets invested into. And we find that works very well for us for several reasons. Obviously, there's an aspect of activity then, the members have to be engaged and so on and so forth. There's also a tremendous aspect of collegiality. Because members are voting each other's money, there's an aspect that drives part of our culture, which is that collegiality, that bonding with members and so on and so forth. And we recognize, and this gets back a little bit to what Christopher said, is that's not what everybody's seeking. Different angels are seeking different things. There are some people who just want to take the money, put it in the asset class, walk away and let someone else manage it. There are funds for that. There are individuals who want to absolutely invest only as an individual and control that. And there are obviously groups, networks that do that as well. And I think the representation that there are such a wide variety of approaches, of groups, of organizations, very much is reflected in, for example, where Christopher and I both happen to be in Boston. We have at least 10, 12 active angel groups in the Boston area each of which has different approaches, each of which is targeting slightly differently, but all are investing early stage into those companies. And so that goes to show the diversity of interests from individuals as to what they're seeking, but also the diversity of approaches that there are so many groups, all of which are active and being successful. One thing I would add to what Christopher said about the fact that the Angel Capital Association does have training materials for emerging group leaders or existing group leaders. There's also a course that the ACA is going to be launching shortly, specifically for people who want to launch their own angel groups, and talking about some of the challenges and talking about some of the approaches that others have already used, not to be directive and say approach A is better than approach B, but rather to say, here are a number of approaches that others have taken. Here are the pros and cons of some of these. Now go and think about what you might want to do if you want to be a group leader going forward. So that course will be coming out shortly as part of the Angel University as well.
Yeah, and highly recommend it for anybody here that's seriously considering it, because everything that the Angel Capital Association puts out is real practical, real world kind of knowledge. And sometimes we get the textbook version and find out the hard way. So
Taylor, one thing I'd add is that to anyone who aspires to start an angel group, regardless of structure, regardless of region, regardless of approach, I think one thing that is universal is thinking a little bit about and paying a lot of attention to and reinforcing the right culture.
mm,
And one of the things that's important in doing that is being selective about the members and understanding. One of the most probing questions you can ask a potential member is, what are your angel goals, right? What are your goals as an angel? And if you get the vibe that the goal is to find consulting work or to get clients for your lawyer practice, that's probably not someone who's going to work out as an angel. And you're going to put a lot of effort into training him or her, and then they're going to churn anyway. Oh, and they'll probably wreck your culture. And it's easier in a big tier 1 city to be choosy than it is in a smaller city. You have to acknowledge that. I mean, that's a reality, and I wouldn't want anyone to get discouraged.
mhm.
But I think being really clear about your culture and your mission of, paying it forward, helping angels, understanding that, of course, you want good time and risk adjusted returns with the money. There's no question that the financial returns are critical to long-term success of any group. But understanding that there are other kinds of returns, building your community and feeling useful and being able to share the wisdom you've built over the course of your career. So thinking a lot about culture and finding angels who are sort of in it for the right reasons, and being selective about saying, you know what, you seem like a great person and I'm sure your mom loves you, but I don't think you're the right fit for this group because we're trying to do this, and we're not looking for, you know, job seekers, gig seekers, or whatever the case may be. It's the worst sin an angel can do is to waste an entrepreneur's time. And those people who are in it for the wrong reasons are the worst offenders in that way.
It's such a great point that you bring up, Chris, and I really appreciate you for kind of elaborating on that. I think this is one we should pass around to the other panelists. And so I'll say my mom used to always tell us that all money isn't good money. And for the folks who, are trying to figure out like what are the red flags or the kind of best practices for attracting and retaining high quality members, with diverse expertise and networks. What are some of the ways that y'all have approached this? And yeah, any tips, pro tips for the newer folks in terms of really trying to kind of, be selective and how to do that well?
I'll jump in here.
Please, Michaela, go ahead.
Yeah, so in addition to my role at Groove, I'm also leading the angel activation work for the state of Minnesota, which is powered through an EDA grant. In addition to that, I've had the opportunity to collaborate with TechTown Detroit on their EDA grant, both of which have a lens on bringing in new individuals to the ecosystem. In the case of the TechTown Detroit grant, that one was really specifically focused on Black, Brown, and female investors. The Minnesota grant that I've kind of worked on is a little bit more broad than that, including Indigenous, rural, things like that.
Nice.
Um, the way I kind of frame this up is, and I should note too, I'm sitting in Minneapolis. So our market is definitely different than the Boston market. Um, I would say a challenge in our kind of ecosystem is first awareness. A lot of folks don't know that this asset class exists.
Mm.
The good old Midwesterners love to be humble, but also they don't talk about money and they don't talk about investments. And so what we see happen is a lack of information exchange around just different investment opportunities, talking about startups, talking about your portfolios, talking about what's getting you excited. And so awareness is a really big piece of this. Then building different education programs. So this year alone, we've run 5 different cohorts, some with different infinity kind of lenses, so female focused, early investors looking at investing in healthcare, different kind of an indigenous cohort, things like that, to really kind of provide, dare I say, a safe space for those groups to learn. But one thing that's been really critical is once that cohort has been built, getting them immediately into the broader ecosystem, angel ecosystem in our markets. So the idea is not to necessarily just create a whole bunch of little pods, because then that makes it really challenging for founders to actually access the capital. So creating kind of that space for people to learn and dig in together, but then making those pathways to get connected to the various different angel networks and groups in our ecosystem. That's been really critical. And actually, I should note, ACA is powering a lot of the content that we're using for our cohorts, which is fantastic. The Angel University information is really great. One thing that we found to be important, though, because those are set up to be virtual, wrapping around that experience in-person content, and kind of being able to thread the needle of what's happening on a national lens, and then translating that to what's happening local in the upper Midwest. So then individual angels are a bit more equipped with the full picture of what to expect. So awareness, education, building community, which we've kind of already touched on, and then just activation is kind of the 4th piece. I kind of like to say, like, building like ramps and building platforms to make it easy for folks to write their first checks. And so making sure that people are kind of like, you don't want to just train them and then have them go away. You need to make sure that they're actually figuring out where and how to write those checks.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'll build off some of that. I mean, Taylor, as your mom commented, not all money is good money, right? And I think there's another approach, and let me approach it from both sides, of as an angel group leader, but also as an angel investor. As an angel group leader, not all members are appropriate for your group. It's another thing I would say. And this speaks a little bit to what Christopher and Michaela both alluded to, which is culture is very important. Any given group, it's an organization. It has its own culture. And I'm not saying one culture is better than another. There are just different cultures. There are different approaches. And not every angel coming in is going to be a fit for any given group. And they can be disruptive. They can be, I would say, a negative impact on a group if it's not a good fit. Similarly, for any given angel, not every group is the right group for you, right? And so there is that matching. One of the things we do at our group to help, I think, smooth that and to help facilitate that is we actually require every prospective member to come to a meeting and participate in discussion. Obviously, they're not actually investing yet, but participate in discussion before they can join. We actually require that. They must come to a meeting. They must participate in discussion, see how our operations work and everything else before deciding to join. And we've had members who did that, or prospective members come and do that and say, gee, you know what, this isn't for me. And that's fine. We'd rather have that than have them join and then be either disappointed or be disruptive. Similarly, we've had at least minority cases, but a case where a prospective member came and we decided they were not right for us. And we had to have a little bit of a difficult discussion with that individual and say, no, we're really sorry, but we just don't feel that you are a fit for our culture, for our group. So I think that's another aspect, is as group leaders are looking for members, but also as individual investors are looking for groups, there should be this matching. And now again, as Michaela said, we have the advantage here in Boston of having a bigger ecosystem. There are more active angels, there are more active groups, so on and so forth. We'll cross refer out to other groups and vice versa.
Mm,
Because of
Yep.
that, we know other groups in the area, and we can say, gee, you know what? Your approach isn't the right fit for us, but here's two groups, one group, whatever it may be, that might be a fit based on what you're looking for, what you're interested in your approach. And we get cross referrals from other groups to us. And now with greater online presence for all groups and virtualization, we begin to do the same regionally and a little bit nationally, not as much nationally, to be honest, because our connections aren't as strong on the other coasts in the Midwest. But I think that's happening as well, where it's who is this member appropriate for, or vice versa? What, is this group appropriate for whom? And I think that
Yeah.
is something that we're doing more and more of.
The the sort of unifying theme, I think, really is, as a leader, setting setting very high standards in terms of, what the conduct and the culture is going to be and how you're going to support entrepreneurs, being very demanding and setting high standards, and then communicating those standards very, very clearly, early and often, and reinforcing that culture at all times. For example, every once in a while, it's invariably a new member, you'll have someone sort of badger the witness, right?
mm,
There'll be an entrepreneur talking, and the person will get their adrenaline up, and there's a million subtle ways to change the culture of your meetings and make sure they work and they're comfortable for every type of entrepreneur. And I
right.
could spend an hour just talking about that, and I won't. But one example that's really concrete is, every once in a while someone will kind of get the red mist, and they're really going after a question, and they know they have a point they have to make that's going to show how smart they are. And every once in a while you'll just have to say, hold on, don't answer that, and then say to the member, hey, could you rephrase that in a more respectful way?
Mm,
And you do that about once every 2 years, and nobody in the room forgets it.
mm,
Right? And it's just a subtle way of reinforcing your culture and making your expectations clear. And as Alden says, Boston's a big city with a lot of angel activity, so we're fortunate to be able to do this. But being really selective, turning people down, limiting the number of guests that you allow at each meeting. Launchpad's run a wait list to get in for 13 years now. Just being selective, and then, you hate to do it, but throwing members out every once in a while.
mhm,
You don't have to do that very often to make people realize that being part of your group is a privilege, not a
right.
right. And when you do that, you create pride of association. People are proud to be part of that group, and they want to refer the quality people that they know. And, we found our best members always come from referrals. And it's the over the transom members you have to be very, very careful with, really careful to screen, really careful to communicate with, and then doing things like onboarding and making sure that they have enough time and they understand what they're getting into, all those kinds of things. But let's go on to the next question.
Yeah, it was a great one though. And I love the emphasis on cohesion. Like, as a leader, that's an important thing that you're protecting. Your point too, Christopher, about like, once you kind of set the tone and people are taking pride in the association, you kind of have like group accountability, right? Other folks kind of holding each other peer-to-peer accountability as members. And I love to hear that. Also too, I think y'all get a bad rep in terms of just like, you got Shark Tank, and now people had reputations or ideas about angel investors being extremely competitive. And so the point that y'all made too about like cross referrals and the support and the kind of like sharing there between angel groups is very, very interesting. And I wasn't even really aware of that. So very cool to take a look under the hood here with y'all. Let's talk about deal flow. It's probably the the question we got the most. I don't know if that's telling and a reflection of the market at the moment. And but is it easy to find? Is it hard? Where does most of your deal flow come
It
from these days?
it really depends a lot on the market, but I'll tell you, in a big city with a lot of tech and innovation, it's easier than in a smaller city. But uh, uh, I'll answer the deal flow question indirectly by saying when a member comes up to someone on the management team and says, "Oh, I didn't like the deals this month," the
Mm.
answer is invariably, "When was the last time you referred a deal?"
Mm.
Right? If you don't like the deals, get out in the community and find some good ones. And
Mm.
in our case, we've never invested in a deal that was a cold application. It's always members getting out as adjuncts in business schools, as judges on business plan competitions, as mentors in accelerators, um, being introduced by founders we've backed before. It's there is terrific entrepreneurial energy and spirit and activity in every city. And if you're not getting good deals, it's because you're not finding them, or you're not a competitive, attractive source of capital. So
Mm.
you gotta get members who want to get out in that community and be involved and hand carry those deals back to you. Sitting back, putting a flag up the flagpole that says we're giving away money, and sitting back and waiting, you're gonna get tinfoil hat crazies apply. You gotta get out and find the deals, and that's it. Takes a village. It takes a membership base to make that happen.
I'm
Yeah,
just gonna,
sorry,
sorry,
go
I
ahead,
want to
Mikel.
double tap on one thing that Christopher said. It was kind of snuck in there with some other really great comments. But if you're not getting good deals, you may not be a competitive capital source. I
Mm.
think that is really worth stopping and reflecting on, especially if you've been in the market for a while. We've seen this play out plenty of times, but I think that's just worth like jotting down and reflecting on, double tapping on. I would also maybe add to, like, if you're perhaps a newer organization and you just set up your investment thesis, if you're not getting the volume of deal flow that you're hoping for, maybe your thesis is too narrowly focused,
Mm.
whether that's industry, geographic, too many kind of toggles. So that might be something to consider if you're kind of a new kind of operation coming in. But I really liked the competitive capital source piece.
Yeah, I'd build on that. I think, you know, for good deals, and we can qualify what is good versus bad, but just broadly, for good deals or better deals, in most cases, those entrepreneurs have multiple options as to where to get their funding. And so, as a group, an angel group needs to be able to clearly, succinctly communicate what is its value proposition to that entrepreneur beyond just here's a check. Now, it could be the terms that come with that check.
Mm.
It could be information that we're going to provide or support we're going to provide long term. It could be connections, network. There could be all kinds of other value. But in most cases, a good deal will have a lot of opportunities to get just cash. And so there's a question as to why should, if I'm the entrepreneur, why should I take cash from your group versus someone else's group? And again, it could be deal terms, it could be intangibles that get added on later or presently, whatever it may be. No, and I think, go ahead, Christopher.
You're making a really important point. I think intentionally, and it's actually something that Michaela said as well. Understanding the value you add is really important, and communicating and selling that and saying, yes, we do a little diligence, and it can take a little bit longer to build a consensus, but we have terrific experience building companies and mentors and people on boards and so forth. But one of the things, you know how they say, oh, what breed is that dog? Oh, it's a mutt. Most dogs aren't purebred, right? Most dogs are mutts, and a lot of deals have mutt angel money, right? They're not in groups, they're not professional, they're not organized. And one of the things that professional angels can do and that can add value, a lot of these deals just need a lead. And
Mm.
professional angels who know how to lead deals and set market appropriate terms and introduce to other professional angels and get rounds syndicated and think about staging capital, set responsible valuations, and set a company up for success so that they can go on to a successful next round. That's one of the things that professional angels can really offer that the sort of party round where no one's really in charge. You can get into a lot of trouble with stacked capital notes and safes and so forth. And so knowing the value you bring and being able to articulate that, being we're really good at leading deals and giving you diligence services. It's not that we're putting you through diligence, it's that we're
Mm.
actually taking the time to write a great diligence report that you can share to help you raise the rest of the money faster. So communicating that to the founders is a really important part of being competitive money. Sorry to jump in, Alden. I'll let you finish your thought.
No problem, Chris. I think that's great. And I absolutely think that's right. It's what is your value proposition as a group, not just to members. Obviously, there's a set of values that you have to deliver to your membership, but what is the value proposition to entrepreneurs? And getting that down to, in essence, a short elevator pitch. Much as the entrepreneur is going to pitch you their idea, you've got to be able to come back and pitch them and say, this is why we're an appropriate group for you. Or, by the way, there will be cases, and there always are, where we are not the appropriate group for you. And not just because I don't like your idea or I don't think it's necessarily good business, but we're not the appropriate group for you for lots of reasons, right? We can't provide you what you're looking for either immediately or long term. And so we're going to pass on that deal. And I think that's an important factor as well. Cycling back really quickly, Taylor, to your deal flow question, our approach is also very different. I mean, we're called Sidecar Angels for a reason. We do not lead deals. That is actually part of our investment thesis. We will not be a deal lead. We only invest as syndicate partners with other groups, or in some cases with early stage VCs. And so those are things that we approach it. And so our deal flow is actually collaborating with other groups, with VCs and other partners. And as Christopher said, we won't invest in a deal that doesn't have what we would consider a professional lead. So if it's an individual who is, Jane Doe is investing $250,000 in this deal as the lead and has set the terms, for us, we'll just say, sorry, we're going to pass on that deal. Because it's because Jane is probably not going to give us a quality diligence report. It's probably not going to give us a quality investment memo, and that's one of our requirements for our deal flow.
Super.
And we feel the same way. I mean, that's why we really prefer to lead deals, because at least it's getting done right. Critically important aspect.
Yeah, I would say too, for operators, it's important going into it to know like your stance on that. We actually at Groove had to shift this. Our first fund, which kind of again is the engine to the Angel Network, we were not anticipating to do as many, like be in a lead position. We found in our market, though, there weren't a lot of lead investors who understood the responsibilities of that role. And so with our second fund, the main piece of our thesis that we changed, or structure, I should say, is the check size. So then we could more appropriately match our check size to being a lead investor. And so, yeah, it's important kind of understanding how that interplays with your operations.
And huge that too, you saw the opportunity there and adjusted to meet it. Which is no small piece of that either. Okay, I'm on Central Time, y'all, but we scheduled for Eastern Time. So we're at 10:44. That gives me about 6 minutes before I open it up for Q&A from our attendees. Let's go. This one I'm also too being a little bit selfish on. I spend a ton of time working with Seraph customers who are angels and taking them through our dashboards and our analysis tools and things like that. I've come to realize that there's a lot of diversity in terms of how folks are evaluating their performance. And, with angel investing kind of already being like a more long-term, asset kind of situation, I'm curious to know, like, how do y'all evaluate and kind of track your performance? Things can change, obviously, like very quickly. Lots of conversations with Seraph customers about making meaning out of like IRR and unrealized returns and all of that kind of stuff. So just curious, because I know y'all are all data driven investors as well. And so I think that's something that our attendees will really get a lot of value out of hearing from you about.
I think IRR does keep you honest. And one of the things I like about Seraph is that it automatically calculates it. And if you just do, I wrote my first check in 2014 and we exited in 2023. Therefore, my IRR is that's going to understate your IRR because the later checks weren't at work for as long. And Seraph automatically gives you an accurate IRR rather than just kind of a seat of the pants IRR. And, most angels are in the second half of their life, and most people in the second half of their life have other people in their lives, significant others and spouses and so forth. And so the resources they're investing are kind of shared. And taking performance seriously and doing it in a professional way. And God forbid you get run over by a bus or abducted by aliens, but actually having your affairs in order and logged into a system like Seraph is really a gift to your relatives if something does happen to you, because they know what you have and how you're doing and where to access it. And you can put company information so that they need to get in touch with the company and so forth. So I think having some kind of a system makes it a lot easier. I speak from experience, having done it on a spreadsheet. It's not easy. The other thing there are a number of informal. That's kind of the quantitative answer. The qualitative answer is that there are ways to keep score that are more about feeling good about yourself or about ego. So, for example, at some point, if you've stopped putting new capital into the asset class and your checks are being funded by exits from earlier deals, that's a pretty good indication that you're doing well. Another one is just looking at the average amount of money into losing investments versus the average amount of money into winning deals. If you're putting 2 or 3 times as much money on average into companies that have done well as you are into losers, that means you're being fairly efficient at recognizing and developing a good follow-on strategy. So those are just a couple of comments, Taylor. I'll defer to the others. I know Michaela's under time pressure, so
Yeah, Michaela, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Christopher, you kind of nailed a lot of the key points there. Certainly, if you have a younger portfolio, one of the key things, which my personal portfolio is and our fund's portfolio is, in that interim, one of the things that we're tracking and looking at are the markups in the follow-on, or not follow-on, but the financing rounds past the ones that we've invested in. Obviously, it's really important to note, and it's obvious, but we're stating like those are not realized returns.
Right.
Those are just indicators of where things are going. And as we know, with market pressures and changes, sometimes valuations are not a good indicator. But for an early portfolio, sometimes that might be the best that you have to work with.
Thank you so much, Ms. Michaela. We really appreciate you. We know you're a very busy woman and got more folks to go help. And share
Yes, this
insight
was really
with.
fun. Thank you so much for letting me join. For the rest of the folks, I've got to jump. I'm active on LinkedIn, so if anyone wants to connect, that's a great place to find me. But my last parting words are, it's fun work, not necessarily for the faint-hearted, but it's really valuable work. So yeah, take care, everyone.
Very valuable. Thank you for everything you do for the entrepreneurial community, ma'am. Have a good day.
Bye.
right.
I'll follow up a little bit on that kind of question about how do you measure returns. We, like Christopher, I think, are data driven. We look very much at IRR, not just because it's objective, which is incredibly important, but also because it does take into account the timing of when the investments were made, the timing of when the exit might occur, right? It's some people just use cash on cash return, right? I invested, I got an exit, it was 3x what I put in. Well, that's fine, but there's a big difference between I got 3x in a year and I got 3x in a decade. obviously, right? Versus alternatives that I could have invested in. So I think IRR works really well for that. We look at IRR in a couple of ways in our group. Obviously, any given individual can look at their own IRR and their situation because we do allow co-investment by individual members on any given deal, and they can add beyond the voted money. But we also look at it as what's the IRR of the group vote. So as I said, we have this voting structure. And so we'll look at IRR of what is the group voted on? What is the IRR of that aspect of the group? Because any given individual may choose to add money in particular deals they like or so on and so forth. So individuals will be all over the map. But as a group, we're looking at what is that, and how are we doing relative to, so we'll benchmark that. How are we doing relative to historic returns for angel investors across the United States? And there are studies that look at that, right? How are we doing relative to other groups that might be publishing their data? And only a few groups do that, but we can benchmark against that, so on and so. That's a great indicator.
Seraph automatically benchmarks you against the S&P, Alden.
Right.
So
That's
that
right.
keeps you honest as well.
And we run that graph, we run that report, we actually show it to our members on an annual basis.
Yep. And I think it's great for accountability because it gives you a sense of you better be above the S&P because on a risk adjusted basis, and you're putting more work in and taking more risk. So the returns ought to be there. Taylor, one thing that we do get asked a lot is your ghost portfolio. What are the deals you didn't invest in and how did they do? And the problem with that question is that the amount of work it takes to keep track of every deal you reject, you really can't do it except on an anecdotal basis. But if you're going to get into the angel group business, be prepared to answer that question because you get it all the time.
You're shedding some light on why when we're doing these onboarding packages and doing data entry for some of our customers, there's always like a tab in there for like the ones I got wrong. Right.
And I think the fascinating ones, building off of that, the fascinating ones are, we've had a couple of deals, but only a couple, where we invested in a company, but only the second or third time we saw them, right? So we actually passed on them the initial time and then invested later. So obviously, ultimately, we liked the company. And then the question is, was the initial pass the right decision or not? Now, in one case, I can think of it was absolutely the wrong decision because we ended up investing at a later stage, and obviously the valuation had gone up and the terms were not as attractive. But in another case, it actually was the right decision because we invested in a later round and it was a down round from the initial round that we passed on. So, there we can say, hey, we made the right decision the first time. Hopefully we've made the right decision the second time. It's still an outstanding question, right? But you can see that too. And I think that's an interesting situation.
It's very interesting. And Taylor, there's a lot of different kinds of performance metrics you can track. So Alden is hinting at one, which is just thinking about the stage at which you invested relative to the performance you've gotten, and realizing that, in Launchpad's experience, we tend to do best when the money we're providing is basically being used to test a go-to-market hypothesis, right? We do worse when we're investing at the 2 engineers, a PowerPoint, and a dog stage, because a lot can go wrong and there can be years before there's traction from an IRR perspective. So knowing there's a million ways to cut up your data, thinking about your performance in different verticals, thinking about your performance of different kinds of CEOs, thinking about your performance in terms of capital efficient and less capital efficient companies, thinking about how do I do if VCs are involved? How do I do if VCs aren't involved? So we pay a lot of attention to stage because there's a whole stack of capital, and angels tend to do best when they get involved at a certain stage in a certain kind of company.
Yeah. And let me build off what Christopher just said is, just another quick plug, but ACA has a course. I'm actually one of the instructors. There's a group of us who teach it on portfolio strategy and looking at data-driven, some of those parameters that Christopher just talked about, looking at data saying which industries might, historically have been more successful, less successful, what stage, what type of CEO experience, CEO age. There's a whole bunch of data we look at. And again, past results don't always indicate the future, right? Let's be clear in that disclaimer. but where people can go through it. It's a pretty core course. It's a 2-hour online course. And so group leaders or members who might be interested can always take a look at that. It's called Portfolio Strategy for those who are interested.
Mr. Alden, I'm gonna definitely follow up with you to get that link because we'll send
Sure.
out follow-up comms to everybody who attended and registered today. And I'm sure folks are gonna be looking to come join you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're supposed to be in the Q&A session, Taylor, so I'll turn it over to
Yeah,
you to kind of
we have
facilitate that.
5 minutes here for the Q&A. If anybody has any questions, let's see, we do have one. Miss Yvonne, thank you so much for writing in. She says, "Hi, thanks for sharing the experience. We are a 60-member group and have difficulty identifying deal leads. As for each deal, it is up to our members to volunteer to be a deal lead. What is your approach? Do you give any incentives for members to volunteer to be a deal lead?" Such a great question.
Christopher, you want to take that one and then I can maybe
Yeah, and
follow up?
I should clarify. There's sort of two different term meanings of deal lead. When I was talking earlier, I was talking about sort of the lead who writes the term sheet and leads the organization of the whole deal and the syndication and so forth. But there is Yvonne's asking about a really second important meaning of that, which is which person in the group is going to step up and really be the project manager to organize the energy and the excitement and the interest and do the work of getting a diligence process completed and a report written. And I'm afraid there isn't an easy answer. I'm not a fan of giving incentives, whether it be, an annual jacket or something, or a trophy or recognition. I think that's having a culture of heroism. It starts to be a slippery slope into who wrote the biggest check and that kind of nonsense. And I think, unfortunately, the answer is finding the right kinds of members, setting the right kind of culture, and holding them accountable. And one of the things to keep in mind is that if no one in your group really is enthusiastic to step up and lead a deal, you're probably not the right group to lead the deal anyway. And
Mm,
if you don't have folks willing to do that work, then you probably don't have the right members, or there's an opportunity to build your membership to include more of those kinds of skills. People who come from a deal making or business background where they feel more comfortable doing that. And of course, there's an opportunity to train as well, and it can take time. It can take a group 5 years of experience to go from not able to lead deals to able to lead deals. And once they see their peers get through it with support, more people will step up. But Launchpad's constantly refreshing its ranks of diligence leads and people who want to lead deals. And if nobody's stepping up, you're probably not a strong or credible lead for that deal anyway. You probably shouldn't force it, because the worst thing you can do is be writing a term sheet and leading a deal where people, like, you don't have good diligence, there's no one to really support it, you can't syndicate it, and then the deal slows down, doesn't fill, gets shop worn, and the company's really hurt by that. So there's nothing worse than a weak deal lead.
And just quickly summarize and build off what Christopher said is, if you don't have at least one member in your group who's excited about the deal, you have to wonder why not? And is that a deal that your group should be doing? I mean, never mind leading. Is that even a group that your group should be participating in? Because if no one's really excited about it, that's a commentary unto itself on that deal, in my opinion.
So I would say to Yvonne, be patient, support and train your people, be really clear about your expectations of members, and recognize that it can take a little bit of time. It's a skill, it's a vitally important skill. And it's probably better to not be in a deal than to be in a deal that's incompetently led. But just be patient and understand that it's something that can take time. Leading a deal is a big responsibility. It's a big undertaking. There's a lot of skill involved, and that doesn't happen overnight.
fantastic. We have 1 more minute, and I'm loving the opportunity to have y'all together. This has been a very powerful conversation. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way. So with this last minute, I'm gonna shoot for 1 more. Mr. Brian Shaw, you asked, we talked a lot about community, and typically the community is made up of individuals. Do you ever see your angels take on staff or team members to manage their investments? And has that typically been a positive change that you've witnessed or more difficult?
So we've seen this with some of our members in terms of the admin side of their investments, tracking them, facilitating reporting, things of that sort, but not in the decision-making aspects. At least we have not seen that in the decision-making at all.
Yeah, we have some family offices as members, and those investors get a lot of support from the family office. And there are some investors, we have one who's been in it for a long time. She's done 250, 300 companies, and she tends to have a personal admin. And some people do share the work with their spouse. But for the most part, Alicia, angels are can-do type A people who've had a lot of success in their life, and they're in this game because they don't feel done yet. They want to be involved. And the hands-on learning is something, these are lifelong learners, and they like to be involved. And um, if they really want to track their performance, but they don't want to do the deal entry work, I think Seraph's a great solution, because Seraph will offer professional services to help you get started loading your deals if you're been doing it for a while, or just to help you on a couple hours a month basis, keeping up to date with your deals. So that's I think I don't, there aren't many angels who need full-time help, but using Sarah for a little professional services each month or each quarter can really be a good stopgap.
Okay. I'm officially over time now, so I'm gonna call it here, though that makes me sad to see y'all go. From the bottom of my hearts and souls here at Seraph, thank y'all so much for lending your insight and expertise to the community. This is one of many more webinars to come. And I'm proud of the fact that we'll be able to share this with folks who were not able to attend. So for those of y'all who did attend, please help us get the word out, because it's rare that you have an opportunity to talk to people who are active and, not just like the folks that sometimes are creating content and they ain't probably wrote a deal in 30 years or something, So thank y'all very much. I appreciate y'all. And we will send out follow-up comms so that you have these folks contact information and you know where their LinkedIns are, and you can stay in tune with the great work that they're doing. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Mr. Alden. We appreciate you. And I hope y'all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Taylor.
Taylor, and I hope
Thanks,
Alicia
Christopher.
does okay with the hurricane. Great to see you, Walden. Thank you for your thoughts.
Oh,
Yes,
no
sir.
problem.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Christopher.
sir.
Thanks, Taylor, and definitely best wishes to Alicia with the whole Florida situation.
Yes, we'll send her y'all's love. Thank y'all.
That's good.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.